Hi, I'm Peter Loshak. Welcome to SBRtv in-studio interviews. We've always had the capacity at SBRtv to have industry people come into the studio and do live in-person interviews, but we've never done one before because, of course, no one in the industry has any desire to show their face on camera, except for the one guy who has always gone opposite of all the rules and conventions in the industry, Bodog founder Calinir. If you don't know who Calinir is, he's been the most publicly visible sportsbook operator for many years. He founded Bodog. He leads a high-profile lifestyle. Some would refer to it as a high-profile Playboy lifestyle. But probably the one thing that's most fascinating about him, at least to me, is that he's got $1 billion. $1 billion, and he's here with us in the studio today, and we'll hear directly from him what it's like to be him. So welcome to SBRtv, Calinir. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right.
I just have to jump in and correct one thing, though. Yeah. It's been about 5 years since I've actually operated a sportsbook.
Oh, okay, okay.
2006 is when I sold out, but I'm still in the brand and technology side of the game, and I'm in the media side. I'm actually sort of on your guys' side.
Right, right. We'll get to that in a second. I thought you were about to say I just have to correct one thing. I don't really have $1 billion. That's not what you were going to say, though, right?
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay, my first question for you is, do you really have $1 billion?
Oh, we got to it quickly. Well, the $1 billion thing was based on a valuation of operating company. And at the time, if you remember, it was back in the heyday of the public companies when they thought that that was the right business model. And as we find out, looking back in history right now, the rush to go public actually created the UIGA and caused all the public companies that rushed to become public got themselves pushed out of the market that they so coveted. But at that time, the companies were quite highly inflated in value. It was sort of like a little mini bubble of sorts. And based on that valuation, the private company that I owned at that time would have been in that range.
Right. But suffice to say, you're not hurting for cash, right?
No, things are pretty good.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Well, if you need a little extra, take a look at Tampa Bay team total over tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. So let's first get into, I want to get into your lifestyle, what it's like to be rich and all that. But I think first let's start with Bodog, the history, and how you did what you did. In general, first let's start out, how did Bodog start? The myth is that you started it with under $10,000. Is that true?
True. That's all what I had in my bank account. But I had other things that were brought to bear. I actually had infrastructure. I had a little business that was kind of a technology incubation company, and we were providing services to tech startups, including internet startups, and that's sort of how I got into the game. But at the time when I actually came up with the idea and started this, what became Bodog, there was actually $10,000 in my bank account. I remember thinking that was actually quite a lot of money.
Right. So, was the internet around back then? What were you doing? You were looking for internet companies in like the early 90s,
Actually, the internet was there, but in Canada, it was pretty much just a university backbone.
Right.
And one of the things that got me into the internet game was I had this internet technology incubation company. And it just happened to be in a building that had a router for the university network that went all across Canada. So I don't know where the idea came from, but I pulled a fiber up from that router, and so I had high-speed internet to the desktop before anybody else in the city of Vancouver.
Wow, in the early 90s.
In the early 90s, and so I got all the internet startups coming to me, and that's what attracted all of them, and then I started learning more about it, and then I ended up in the internet business.
So you had started out Bodog with $10,000 and technical skills, or what did you have at that point?
Yeah, well, I had business skills, and I had business infrastructure, and I had something that a lot of people don't know about, and I had Cisco Systems. They operated their Western Canada offices out of my office. And because they were there and my proximity to them, they'd actually trained me quite a bit. I actually took their sales course.
Really?
Yeah, their internetworking sales course. So I actually had quite a good layman's understanding of how internetworking worked. But another thing that a lot of people don't really realize is I actually have a science degree, right? So I have a science background.
Right. Okay.
So it wasn't all that off course for me.
What were the first 6 months of Bodog's existence like? What were you doing?
Putting a plan together and doing research and trying to figure out, because you got to remember, back in 1994 when I started all this, there was no software providers.
Right.
Nobody had a clue what jurisdictions you should operate out of. Just everything you could think of now as being kind of normal didn't exist. So it was just research. Like the first 6 months was just me and my assistant, this woman named Chari. Just the two of us doing research.
And then, so at what point after when you started it, did it start sort of come together and you suddenly became, at least a small successful sportsbook?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like an overnight success. I think it was 12 years. Yeah, I started in 94 and I didn't really feel that I was doing anything till about 2002, 2004. So it wasn't 12 years, maybe 8 or 10 years of grinding. And then it started to lift off after that.
Really?
But it went quickly. from there.
When I think of when Bodog started, I thought it was like 2000 or 2001. That's what I had in my mind. But
2000 was when I launched the Bodog business model. After having studied the industry for 6 years,
wow.
I said, no, there's a better way to do this.
Right.
And that's where I came up with the Bodog business model. But the Bodog business model itself didn't just immediately take off. It took about 2 years for it to sort of get through this gestation curve, and then about 2002 it really started to lift.
Right. So for the first 6 years, you weren't even taking bets.
We were a technology provider.
Okay.
Service provider to other people. So we were a service provider till 2000 when I decided to launch my own site.
And then in 2000, tell us about how that happened when you started. You had this idea because from everything I've read, you sort of had the Bodog vision from the beginning. You know?
No.
Oh, no.
No, not at all. Not at all. I came up with the Bodog concept and business model over quite a few years, and in fact, a lot of it was based on frustration because I was providing services to other operators, and I would come up with an idea, and I'd say, "Why don't you do this?" And they'd say, "No, that's a crazy idea. You know, build software. You don't know what you're talking about." So I'd be like, "Okay," and I'd go back and I'd think about it some more. And over the years, of helping other people with their business and getting the majority of my ideas, especially the ones that actually proved to be most successful with what I did with Bodog, which were kind of like considered to be non-conventional, which is, of course, always what typically works the best.
Exactly.
They got pushed back, and I eventually came up with this idea.
So then, around 2000 is when it really started to happen, and it happened very fast at that point, right?
2000 to 2002, there was a little bit of lift off, and then it went steep.
And
so about 2002, it really went.
And at that point, you became the all-star marketer that people associate with your name.
Exactly. Well, interestingly enough, what happened is the organization around me matured to the point where I actually didn't have to be bogged down in the executive details, and I was free to actually focus on marketing.
Right. And let your mind wander and come up with things like Cole Turner.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fun. I still use them actually on my website, my cartoon strip.
It allowed you to sit back and be like, chicks. If I incorporate chicks in this, it'll explode way past all my competition. Right. So then, so then, what happened? It became like you started to become a little bit successful, and then over the span of what, like 2 years, you exploded into this.
It was literally an explosion. I've told this story quite a few times, but when I first started this business, I thought this is going to be great. I'm going to build software in Vancouver. I'm going to speed down. First, I thought it was St. Kitts because that's where I originally was before I came to Costa Rica. But I'm going to be down there in the tropics part of the year, in the wintertime, hopefully. In the summertime, I'll be up in Vancouver, and I'll go back and forth. And, when the dust all settles, if I can have a bit of money in the bank, then great. I had a good life, and plus I got some money out of it.
Right.
Well, was I ever wrong? When things exploded on me starting about 2002, it was like hanging on the tail of a rocket or something. It's really just exploded. Right. In the traditional sense.
So it wasn't quite like you were like, I know I'm going to be a billionaire and let's just see how it happens.
Never even entered my brain.
I'm going to try to have a good life, have a comfortable financial life, and make smart decisions.
Actually, I'm not significantly money motivated. When I do stuff, I like building stuff. I get a lot of fun out of that, and I like to sort of organize my life around lifestyles.
Right.
So I've always been like that. That's why I was thinking, live in the tropics, live up in Canada, right? So the money actually just kind of fell out of a tree, actually, quite frankly.
So you didn't like see the opportunity of online gambling and be like, oh my God, this is just like free money everywhere. I'm just going to get millions and billions.
I thought that it would be successful, but honestly, I mean, when you're just a young guy sitting there starting a tech company on a shoestring, I mean, you're not dreaming of, champagne and Playboy bunnies. It just wasn't like that.